The Breakfast Club is a 1985 film written and directed by John Hughes. It stars Ali Sheedy, Emilio Estevez, Anthony Michael Hall, Molly Ringwald, and Judd Nelson. And isn't a film that I'd probably normally have covered. There isn't anything to say that hasn't already been said. I can't really do a deep analysis because thousands of people already have. It's been out that long. But I wanted to talk about it for one very important reason. There is someone who's been interacting with the channel for a long while, and I can only assume it's the same person based on partial usernames and profile picture, because that profile picture in both cases is Ali Sheedy as Alison Reynolds in this film. So I'd assume that they're a fan of The Breakfast Club. It would make sense. It's a logical inference. But about a year ago, they became a patron of the channel. So this is arguably, hopefully, a patronversary present. Otherwise, I've completely misread everything, and I'm just doing a video randomly on The Breakfast Club. But either way, it's a fun film. But if you want to potentially get one down the line, depending on how many people there are at the time, why not? There's always a link in the description below. There's a link at the end as well for the Patreon. Join the club. Why not? Shameless plug. Yes, I did. But this film, I didn't come to until late in life. I was well past the point that the messages were probably at their most useful to me. But I enjoyed it. This is the quintessential Brat Pack film, even though a lot of people don't like that term, but it sounds like the Rat Pack. I get it. But this was one of those that, for a lot of people, yeah, that's what high school was like. We had the geek, the cheerleader, that kind of thing, you know, these groups of people who sort of never the twain shall meet, as they say. But the core thing of this film and why I think it resonated so well with people is something that's been said multiple times since. And I don't know if this started a lot of these things, but I like to think it did. Just because you are one of the cool kids doesn't mean you don't have problems. Just because you're the weirdo who sits in the corner doesn't mean you've got a lot going on up there. Just because you've come from a very traumatic upbringing doesn't mean that you can't bring out the raw truth in people and situations. Just because you thought teaching would be a fun job doesn't mean that you now hate it 20 odd years after. And I know I mentioned people at the start, but I do quickly want to give a tip to Paul Gleason. His comedy chops are great. I think he's brilliant here as Dick Vernon. But this film really has a good core message to me. Or there's a couple of core messages, I suppose. Like I say, there is the whole thing about you don't know what battles people are fighting. You don't know what people are dealing with. John Bender looks like any other rebellious teen. He's just out to stick it to the man and have fun while he's doing it. He doesn't care about the consequences. If anything, it keeps him occupied every Saturday. But the fact that we have a traumatic backstory, his home life is very much what we consider trailer trash kind of scenario. And he's surrounded by these people who are quite well-to-do by all accounts, by the looks of things. So him being thrust into that world and not feeling like he's part of it, I think has given him that wonderful outside view. He sees the personae that all of these people have, and that is the correct plural, I'm fairly sure. But he sees this world of untruth that they built. And he can just get in there, hit right at the foundation and make them question, actually, who am I? What am I doing this for? And it's such a great character. But there is a moment that I don't think I've ever picked up before. I mean, I've only watched it maybe a couple of times, but when he's taken into the little room and Vernon's there and threatening him, obviously with no witnesses, abuse of power much, but there's a moment where he goes, and the flinch is real. Judd Nelson did not know that he was going to do that, but it sells the moment so well, because you see that for all this bravado, he himself, while he's talk about, honesty and things like that, all this bravado, he himself is still just a terrified child. He's still in school, remember? He's a terrified child underneath it all. And with his peers, who he knows he can best, great. But the moment real threat from an adult comes, the trauma just floods back. It's so well done, so well handled. And every single character here, and every single actor, let's say, while we're there, has those kind of moments where you see the walls breaking down. And I do quickly want to say that there are moments where they're all talking and things like that, and they're all looking a bit sad. Ali Sheedy has the greatest sympathetic sadness I think I've seen in film for a long while. I'd totally forgotten about this. I don't know what the proper term is. There's like a tear line when people are starting to feel sad. There's like tears that well up before they actually fall. And every single time that someone's talking about something sad and it pans to Ali Sheedy's face, she's got the tear line. And that just sells the moment. It's brilliant acting. I forget that this was only about a year between this and Short Circuit. It was such a small gap. And Stephanie and Alison are so different character-wise. But, she's just so good. I mean, everyone here is so good. And the weird thing is, two of these actors were below their 20s. They were both 16 years old, Anthony Michael Hall and Molly Ringwald. I'll get on to Molly Ringwald in a second, because, I want to talk about some of the problems of this film, really. I think I have to. But Anthony Michael Hall was, unfortunately, growing up during this. They actually filmed it generally in order. From the start of the film to the end of the film, Anthony Michael Hall had a growth spurt. So I can't remember who it was, but he basically started short or about the same height and then got taller as the shoot went on. And you can kind of tell, the first scenes with him, he looks like a child. At the end of the film, he looks more mature, but the experience they've had throughout the day, it kind of works if you can just suspend disbelief for a second. But yeah, Molly Ringwald being 16 and a particular scene of someone looking at a certain private area, obviously covered up, but obviously it was a different time. Things that we wouldn't allow today, we allowed then. And she's even said she's uncomfortable with it now. It's not something that she would have done probably if she'd have been older. But, it was in the film, it's what they wanted to do, fine. We'll have that moment of, he's still just a horny teenager kind of thing. And of course, there is an F word that we don't like to use anymore in the film, but any film pre the 90s where there's like macho bravado kind of stuff going on, it's probably going to fly around. It still happens occasionally in stuff today as shock value, but it's a word that I think we'd like to get rid of, or at least return it to being a bundle of sticks. But even with those, the core message here of everyone has their own battles, and you can't just narrow someone down to a stereotype. You can't just concentrate someone into one word. Nerd, jock, princess, criminal. You cannot just say these people are these things. And trying to do that, trying to reduce them to this simple core concept, removes who they are. We as humans are individual, complex beings. There are people who I've worked with in menial jobs who, whilst not Goodwill Hunting levels, but have a lot more intelligence than a lot of people assume people in these menial jobs would have. And not the kind where, they're just doing it to pay through university or college, whatever you call it, but where that is their job. It's just they needed money, they needed to survive, they couldn't hang on for something better. These people exist out in the world. There are people who also may seem like they've got all the book smarts, but they can't build a lamp. And every single person on this planet has their uses. You have a skill set unique to you that no one else can do. That's great. You be authentic you. Don't fit into the different groups. And high school is terrible for cliquey groups. I mean, I don't think it's quite as bad as films make it out, even in the States. I think it's a caricature. But you do find these cliquey groups. And we need to break from that mindset. When we start to realise that people are more than just an archetype, that's when we can really understand each other, where we can really get on, and we can be better people all round for it. So, whilst it wasn't a film I grew up with, whilst it was late in the day, I still fully appreciate the core and the heart of this film. And some great music, great comedy, and of course great acting. I do have a couple more things I just want to finish out with, and I'll start with the less good one, because I always like to end on a high, literally, in this case. But the prettification, the normalization, whatever you want to call it, of Alison. I don't like that. And now I think about it, this is probably what the faculty was basing its own conversion of Stokely on. Weirdly enough, both of the actors in that are people I really like. So I don't know what that is. Weirdo characters played by actors I like being normalized. Can we just not do that, please? It's not as bad as like the she's all that kind of thing. Is it the one where they take the glasses off and all of a sudden pretty? That trope needs to die as well, but the idea that the weirdo needs to just be dolled up to become fine and acceptable. Again, I know this was a long while ago, but still, no. But yeah, the thing I want to end on The marijuana scene is just hilarious, and I don't understand how Emilio Estevez got that reaction, or not Emilio Estevez, Andrew Clark got that reaction if he's smoking the same as everyone else. I think his was laced with something. But on the thing about, obviously 2 of them were 16, don't worry, and also it was illegal then anyway, it was oregano in that. So don't worry, they weren't giving marijuana to minors, but it would have been funny if they did. But yeah, very illegal. But yeah, The Breakfast Club, like I say, I enjoyed it a lot, and thank you for, like I say, a year of support and reminding me that this is actually a really fun film to watch. And like I say, if that profile picture is ironic and you don't really like it, I'm sorry that I've given you a terrible present, but hopefully I've judged it correctly. But that's what I'm going to say on The Breakfast Club, so until next time, as always, thank you for watching, and take care. And eat my shorts.
The most convenient definitions. But what we found out is that each one of us is a brain, and an athlete,
And a basket case. A princess.
and a criminal. Does that answer your question? Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club.